Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the April 9 work session of the Ann Arbor City Council, Building for Tomorrow, Infrastructure and Projects. Floor is yours, Mr. Lazarus.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. Tonight is the first of three successive work sessions where we're going to try and engage in an open and robust conversation about what the future looks like. Tonight's session is on Building for Tomorrow, and they really address what council's vision is in terms of how we get the infrastructure to meet the future needs of the city. We've addressed what you'll see in the coming year through another document that's attached to Legistar, which is really the work plan for the coming construction season. It addresses road improvements, utility improvements, sidewalks, and other things that we've programmed in. It does provide both maps and listed locations of where we're going to work. And in addition to being the work plan for the year, it also provides a pretty good path to look for accountability in how the city is spending the taxpayers' funds. I would also invite people who are watching to go to the city's website under the City Administrator Strategic Planning, and there's an opportunity to participate in that in the process there as well. And then finally, as we get to the end of this evening, we're going to be asking the question of what else would you like to see in the citizen survey that we're going to conduct this summer in terms of additional questions and focus areas, because that'll help shape what we ask our residents to comment on. So with those things in mind, Greg and Marty have done an excellent job of trying to stir the pot a little and get your interest so that we can have that kind of discussion.
Hopefully we'll stir the pot. Jackie, I don't know if you want to lower the screens for the audience to see. As the screens are going down, I'll again reiterate what Mr. Lazarus has said. The attempt here tonight is not to go into detail, not to go into detail about what we are doing in the next year, but we are trying to focus you out 5, 10 years out to give us direction where you want to see the city end up. And then to that means we're going to start off by going over some of where Ann Arbor is now and what some of our trends are, and hopefully that will stimulate you to think about where you want us to be in the future. Ann Arbor today, we're about 120,000 folks. About 3/4 of us are college educated or beyond, and 80% are what we would call white collar. So currently we are a professional, well-educated community. Where are we headed? Right now, we're about 120,000, under 120,000. We're projected to be up to 132,000. That's about a 13% increase in our population, so we're still growing. So we have to accommodate that growth somehow. Our households will go up about 6%. And we're seeing a lot of that occurring right now on the north and west side of Ann Arbor. And the screens are not lighting up at all. So we'll just go forth without. Ann Arbor employment projections. We're going to gain about 13%, roughly 13% in employment. Most of that will be added on to the 80,000 that are already commuting in and out of Ann Arbor. So approximately 18,000 more. So we'll be up around 100,000 coming and going every day, every work day. So how do we accommodate that? What do we do differently to address our transportation needs in and out and about the city? What have we done to date? Um, Under the complete and green streets policy, you'll see that at Fifth, when we reconstructed Fifth, we put stormwater storage underneath the street. When we redid Stadium Boulevard, we accommodated stormwater and accommodated pedestrians on that. We added sidewalk where there wasn't sidewalk. Stone School Road, ditto, stormwater, pedestrians, and bike, and I should say bikes on Stadium also. Getty's, stormwater, pedestrian path, and bike on one side. South Forest, we've added stormwater. So as we go forward with projects, we are attempting to accommodate the green and complete streets, but understanding that that's very expensive to do, and we have to have the will to continue doing that. Non-motorized and multimodal, most of these are yet to happen. They are plans, but we haven't dug down deep yet and started to move forward on these. And I say that with the exception of, all of these. The tree line master plan, Reimagine Washtenaw, State Street Corridor, and the Ann Arbor Train. All of those are plans, but they're not yet construction programs. So how do we make that a reality in the future? Downtown street design, we're looking at Huron Street, what we can do there to make it a complete street and more pedestrian friendly. First and Ashley two-way conversion, that will be going forward as a study. William Street bike lane, there's a commitment when William Street is redone with the DDA and the city to look at bike lanes. South University streetscape has been completed. Utility projects. Water plant 1 replacement is upcoming. We know we have to do that. The challenge we have there is the emerging needs, the emerging chemicals of concern in the environment. How do we design for that plant, knowing that there are things like PFAS looming on the horizon and no real path forward yet for treatment? So how do we design that to allow flexibility in the plant and in the space so that we can deal with upcoming challenges? The Allen Creek berm opening is close to being a reality. Technically, I think we're there. We're dealing with some legal easement issues that we may come back to seek your support on, but technically it's a doable project. We have the funding all but totally aligned for it. Here in West Park Sanitary Wet Weather, that's a sanitary sewer that we know we need to upsize. This work would be done as a result of the action council took 2 years ago now, when we went to developer payment in lieu of fees. We would use those fees to make this fix to our system. In the sanitary and stormwater manhole cover art is just a cool project. Sustainability, we have a number of initiatives under sustainability. Each one of these brings their own price tag, and some of them are substantial price tags as we go forward. So we are faced with how do we implement these programs. The Green Fleet, as we go forward with green fleets and we have to pay the incremental cost to upgrade our vehicles to something different other than an internal combustion engine, how do we fund that, and what is the impact on the resulting funds? Clean and renewable energy, there's challenges there with regulatory challenges and the cost of also undertaking clean and renewable energy. Zero waste. We don't have a zero waste program yet in Ann Arbor. How do we build one with the staff limitations we have and all the resulting issues of a zero waste program? Carbon fee and dividend plan, that's a policy decision, might even be a state legislative decision as to how we go forward on that, but yet a challenge, and it will bring its own costs. City facilities, power generation, and energy efficiencies. Why we have worked over the decades of making the city facilities more power misers, that we are being very conservative with how we use power within the facilities. How do we go forward and squeeze it even harder? You're going to see that as we look at replacing the air conditioner, the chiller on this building, the major chiller. We'll be asking, excuse me, we'll be asking for an engineering study that also takes into account looking at all the energy options, the efficiency options, and what are those costs. So when we bring back an answer, it will be, here's one end of the spectrum, here's the other end of the spectrum, and this is what it's going to cost. Influences as we go forward. We have a number of city master plans, and I had counted these days ago, and I don't even remember, but there are a number of master plans as we go forward that influence the decisions we make. And how do all these master plans fit together and mesh and provide us the direction that we are seeking and need? And at the same time, we have done the pavement asset management plan, which we are following and going forward on. We are developing those similar asset management plans for sanitary, storm, and water. And we'll be eventually coming forward with investment plans for those. Although we already have the CIP and investment plans, these are required by our regulator, MDEQ. And so we may have to modify our plans to match their format. And then we have the University of Michigan within us, and as they make decisions going forward, they have a big impact on us. And Ann Arbor Public Schools, we should be going in the same direction as Ann Arbor Public Schools for student safety, transportation of students, getting students to and from school. And then development impacts on us as we have increased transportation needs. And as I talked about, the alternative transportation, rail, water and sewer, and streets. So that sets the stage of where do we go and where do you folks want us to go? So as we go forward, we could be looking at trends. Biking, more biking. What is the council's desire on that? Transit is at park and ride. Do we go to dedicated transit lanes? We need to hear from you as to how you want us to treat that in the future. Pedestrian improvements, we understand that, but do you want us to put sidewalks in every place there's no sidewalks? Do you want us just to focus on sidewalk gaps? What is your direction on pedestrians? Mobility in the future, what is a mobility system? I'm not quite sure I know right now, but there are some opportunities as we go forward with the future and technology and Uber, Lyft, parking. How do we serve our our seniors and less served citizens in the future. Connected vehicles, what does that mean for us? Does it mean we have more traffic, less traffic? What is the council's wish to invest in connected vehicles? And I know you probably would like to know more about that, so you know what that investment could rewards be. What are you hearing from your constituents? I know they're saying fix our roads or fix the roads, and we get that message, and we're working on that. But what are your needs beyond that? And then, as Mr. Lazarus said, the citizen survey. What do you want to know on the citizen survey? And what questions should we be asking that we're not asking? So, no, I've done a lot of talking, and we're ready to start listening to what you folks want to set for a direction for us. And let me introduce Kayla Coleman's with us to capture your thoughts as you go forward, and as will Marty, and Nick Hutchinson is here as a resource for street questions.
Actually, I'll start off perhaps uncharacteristically with a question. In one of your slides, you indicated a projected increase of residents by about 13% over the next 25 years or so.
Yeah.
You also envisioned an increase of 13% of employment.
Yes.
And also, but then an increase of 25% commuters.
Yes.
Help square that. That doesn't make intuitive sense.
It doesn't, but commuters are in and out both. It's not all in.
So it's not
We
20,000.
we have people living here going out, and we have people out coming in.
Those are the SEMCOG projections?
Yeah.
Also, those projections show a very increased aging population, so not of working age.
Which would suggest a reduction in,
I suppose that's true.
all right, but the in and out makes a difference.
Yes. I struggled with that too until I had that, that's right. They go both directions.
Understood.
We always think of the in the morning and the out in the afternoon, but it's the other way also.
Councilor Berlin?
You asked, what we're hearing, and you said, you
Yes.
acknowledged, fix the roads. I mean, more than anything, that's certainly what I've been hearing. And also hearing the concern that the city seems to be more focused on big-ticket items. New infrastructure, the train stations, tree line, urban trail, that sort of thing. Rather than replacing, updating our existing infrastructure, the roads, parks, facilities, water and sewer systems. And I will say, again, with the recent sewage overflow on a street a couple blocks away from me, and Councilmember Westfall and I sit on the Board of Insurance, so we get down the weeds on, the TVing, rotting, jetting districts, that sort of thing. And so preventative maintenance, if you will. And this is Tree City. We have lots of neighborhoods with mature trees. This latest sewage overflow was caused by trees, roots in the pipes. And so, again, and I know from our Board of Insurance meetings that we don't do this sort of preventative maintenance, TVing, jetting, rotting specifically, and throughout Ann Arbor. And that's the kind of thing where, I think an ounce of prevention, as they say, is worth a pound of cure, that we should be focusing on. And again, that was sort of confirmed tonight with the discussion of signature projects. I do very much appreciate that we have an objective and consistent measure for our conditions of our roads, and I appreciate using the PASER rating system. And I appreciate that, and would like to thank you for following up on the initial assessment that you conducted in 2014. And with this last assessment 2017.
And we plan to continue it every 3 years.
Okay, that's a good way to objectively measure our progress. And the targets that we all know that we established was to have 80% of the roads in good to excellent condition. The bad news, of course, is that the actual results of the updated assessment are very discouraging. And no surprise to anyone. And so we've actually gone backwards, and pretty significantly backwards on our local streets, which make up 2/3 of the street infrastructure, the city's road system. So on the local roads, about 43% or almost half are either failed, very poor, poor. And that's, again, I appreciate your honesty and what these measurements are telling us. That's 13% more than
And
the
it tells us
30% in
where
bad
we-
condition.
Tells
Yeah.
us where we have to focus our efforts.
Right. That's my point.
Yeah, no, and we
It's
take
30%
that.
worse than when we first measured in 2014. And I see that the condition of our major roads has improved a bit overall since 2014, but generally speaking, overall, we're moving in the wrong direction. We're not anywhere near our targets. You know, again, it's not surprising knowing what we're seeing out there. But I would, so in response to this situation, I would encourage us, rather than continuing to divert street millage dollars to things other than actually fixing the roads, we've diverted a lot of money to sidewalks, that, you know, to stay on this path, when we initially set up this pavement asset program with 80% good or excellent as our target, that we, you know, now we're, again, arguably worse off, then it's important to direct our resources to trying to achieve these, you know, targets that we had initially established. On the funding shifts that you referenced, I am confused about, that you have referenced, you know, over time, and I just referenced, can we use the federal funds, Act 51 funds, and county millage funds on local streets?
Yes. I look at Marty because there is some limits how
Because
much
the
of.
handout suggests they can be used for major streets.
We can use Act 51 in both major and local. It's the county millage that we can,
I'm sorry.
county millage is only local,
Okay,
only major. Sorry,
okay,
not-
county can only go on the major. Act 51 can go major or local.
Act 51 and county millage only for major?
No, county only for major. Act 51 can go major or local
Major or local?
by formula. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Goes more towards the majors than the locals.
Okay, because we, again, need to focus our attention on these local streets that are failing.
And that's where the local millage would have to go to.
Yeah, and I would like to see us not divert funds, you know, just spend on actually fixing the roads. Not tonight, but just going forward, if you could provide the numbers on how we've actually spent the street millage dollars over the last 3 to 4 years.
Sure.
And for fiscal year 18, how much, I would like a breakout on how much on major roads, local roads, how much on sidewalks, and how much on other transportation-related items. And then also, if you can provide your best rough estimates on how much we need to spend going forward annually to achieve the 80% targets, that would be
Yep.
appreciated.
And
Okay, thanks.
that's the software lets us make that estimation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. There's a slide that talks about the downtown street design projects that we're doing. Can you tell me, is the city responsible for the sidewalks from the building to the curb? That entire area?
What do you mean by responsible? Are we responsible to keep the snow off
No,
and to
no,
keep
I
them
mean,
clean?
to keep it in good repair. And
That is the
maintenance.
property owner's responsibility, but we have taken that on as part of the sidewalk millage. And in the downtown area, the DDA is turning their share of the sidewalk millage over to us to do that work. And I got to look at Nick to make sure I haven't misspoken on any of that.
When we first added sidewalks to the street village, we changed city code. The city is now responsible for maintaining the sidewalks.
Okay, Ed, yeah, come on up. Ed. But the DDA is giving us their share of the funding for that.
Yeah, the city code was modified back when the concept of the city maintaining sidewalks first came into play. So by code, the city is now responsible for maintaining the repair of the sidewalks. In the DDA area, we define the sidewalk as, well, typically the building face going out 5 to 6 feet, the typical walkable area that you would imagine as a sidewalk. The area between that, the walkable zone and the back of the curb, which we refer to as the amenity zone, is still the responsibility of the adjacent property owner to maintain. And I think the DDA, don't quote me on this, but I believe the DDA takes a hand in organizing that as well.
Okay, so if that amenities area is in poor condition or poorly maintained, it's really the property owner's responsibility, not the DDA or the city.
That's correct.
Thank you.
And I will add one complicating factor to that. If a building has a vault underneath the sidewalk, the property owner is responsible for the vault.
And the sidewalk.
The sidewalk, which is the roof of the vault, becomes theirs also.
Do we have a map available that shows all of the locations where sidewalks downtown are over top of a vault?
As a matter of fact, we've been working on that. We took some historical information that we had about where vaults were, and we just completed a survey using ground penetrating radar, which is pretty good at detecting large voids underneath the sidewalk surface. So we've now pulled that information all together, and we're just finalizing the map that we believe is the best information we have on where vaults are located at.
Great anticipation. Thank you so much.
Councilmember Westfall.
Thank you, and thank you for a great presentation. I guess just a couple brief comments and a question. This, I guess this, in the end, relates to property taxes and economic development and so on, but generally, with the population forecast, I think it would be helpful to put what we're seeing in some context, just for the public's sake, like even going back to the 70s and actually having an x-axis that starts at 0, and because from my understanding, there was pretty insignificant growth for a few decades, and then we've just recently ramped up a little bit. So I appreciate everything, all the improvements that have been put into pedestrian infrastructure. I think we're fortunate that that's one of our major, well, fortunate and unfortunate, that's one of our major public health hazards is pedestrian safety. So getting into what we're hearing from constituents, something that seems to be at the root of many complaints is just the fact that we're seeing more cars overall. And I think part of that is on the major roads, and also part of it is because people are using these apps that route them the most efficient route, and it's coming through neighborhoods, and so we have traffic calming processes in place, which is great. I'm assuming there is no right answer or satisfactory answer to what are we doing about traffic. Nixon Road is that's an optimistic development, and my only answer I can come up with are roundabouts, because that seems to be technologically the thing that is really effective in terms of delays and so on. But overall, the number of cars is just going to increase, and that's.
And if I can jump in one quick.
I'm finished, so.
Our transportation master plan, and I would expect as we go forward with the next planning effort in transportation, very clearly the master plan stated no new lanes or no new roads. And I think historically, it's been borne out that you add laneage and you induce more traffic yet even more. So the answer is we are currently not looking at more lanes, and nor do we expect direction from council to add more lanes. It is, what do we do to provide other modes? How do we get people in and out and about the city more effectively, efficiently?
Some of the more difficult decisions I think council will have to make over the coming years is the subject of management of the right-of-way, and how do we optimize the capacity that we have. Craig talked a little bit about connected vehicles and connected signals, and when you put that into a future that maybe has some more self-driving autonomous vehicles, it can lead towards better management of the intersections and timing. But there are also other hard questions in terms of other means of transportation that the council may have to make. You'll see that on the Huron Street proposals, where we were looking at non-peak hour parking on Huron. You may also look at peak hour dedication of lanes for transit. There are cases this summer where all of the major work we're going to be doing includes some sort of bicycle facility, which, as is the case on Pauline, requires the removal of parking on one side of the street. It's nice when we can get neighborhoods to agree, but generally that's not the case because of the different interests. And council members are going to have to make those tough calls as we try and weave together cars, buses, bicycles, and pedestrians. One of the things when you look at pedestrian interactions with vehicular movement and connected vehicles, pedestrians can be sometimes viewed as agents of chaos because they're unpredictable and you can't always estimate what the load is. So one of the questions that'll come up from a design standpoint is, do we look at grade separation of pedestrian traffic so that we can better optimize intersection design? So those are some of the things that we'd like to get some feeling on before we go down the path of dedicating resources to planning and design so that we get your feel beforehand. And the decisions you make actually will influence future councils as well. So as we get into the more detailed planning, we look at the CIP. Those are things that we'll ask for your input on.
And the issue of grade separating pedestrians and bicycles out of traffic will be upon us very soon as we look at some of our major intersections to be more pointed, Maiden Lane, East Medical, Fuller Glen. As we go into those intersections, we are struggling to come up with any sort of design that works with the pedestrian loads that are in those intersections, that we are struggling, and probably will have to come back and be looking at you folks for a recommendation to grade separate. And how do we grade separate the pedestrians and bikes out of those intersections so that the pedestrians can be served and the vehicle traffic can be served? Or do we have to come up with some other alternative transportation that pulls people out of vehicles?
Councilmember Costa?
Thank you. I have actually forwarded some of these emails to both the city administrator as well as Mr. Huppy that has been coming to us, especially I'm sure Ward 2 council members get these emails as well. This is in respect to the developments that are going on of Nixon, the Nixon North, Nixon South projects. Residents have rightfully said, I mean, these roads were redone, and now those huge vehicles that come in for the construction is literally ripping the roads apart, and they feel, why should tax monies that were provided by residents now, I mean, my question is this. Just like you have a security deposit on a house, like if you, normal wear and tear is understood, but if you like break the mirror or break something else, the people can, landlords can take the security deposit part of it to cover the cost, right? So this is what residents are asking. Can we, when we sign off on development projects, is it possible to have not the normal wear and tear, but extreme, I don't know, roads being broken up and ripped up, that the developer actually foots the bill to leave it at the condition it was in before the development? Or is this something that we as a city council, because development has become like a very part of the normal scenario in Ann Arbor now, and these are not like 2 houses being built, these are like hundreds and thousands of units being built, and I can speak from the experience of Ward 1. I think we seriously need to rethink, because when a road costs like 7, 8, 9 million to redo, complete redo, it's not, we are not talking about a couple of $1,000 here, right? So any ideas on this issue? This is not just for Nixon, but I'm thinking development that is going all around the city.
I'll give you the answer I've gotten before when it's been asked. If the vehicles are running legal and they are running with license plates on them, they have every right to use the road. That's a public road. Now, whether in negotiations with a developer before they come in, I would leave that to the development and the attorneys to discuss what obligations they would have or not have. Where the development is going to add capacity and cause degrading of traffic flow, we have been successful in getting participation. But in the past, when we've asked for construction traffic, basically, if they're running with a legal load and in Michigan with a plate on, they have every right to use a public street. I look
I
back
didn't-
at the attorneys to do some more research on it, but that's the
I
answer.
didn't say, I'm not saying that certain people can't use the street, I mean, I'm,
They're using the street legally.
yeah. So when they cause wear and tear, that's beyond the normal wear and tear. That's my question. So something can be put in the development agreement that it's up to the city, you're saying? There's nothing illegal about it, right?
We can look at it, but I'm not going to say we can or can't. That's a,
I think if they're responsible for damages, that's different than wear and tear. And I think anybody would be responsible for that. As Craig said, we will look at the development agreement to see how we can address that. But the problem is, when you have heavy vehicles that are still within the legal limit, and they're legal on those streets, it does, if the street is designed properly, it should stand up to the wear. But if the street, over the course of time, initially wasn't built properly, they can cause additional damages. But we will follow up, legally to see what we can do, and then it does become a matter of policy that we can pursue on behalf of the city as well.
Thank you.
Councilmember Kosopoulos, you still the floor? Oh, pardon me. Councilmember Warpahowski.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. First of all, to follow up on the city administrator's comments, I think calling pedestrians agents of chaos is a fantastic brand. I want an agent of chaos badge that I can sew on my jacket when I'm walking around town. I like it.
And I love pedestrians, it's just a matter from traffic planning. It's harder to predict what they're going to do, so it's not in any way a derogatory term.
On the transportation infrastructure theme, in the handout, you describe sort of the dark before the dawn, I think, in terms of our road construction and
I think that's Nick's words, yes.
Okay. Is it your belief, or Nick's belief, or whoever's belief, that we are, despite the declining quality for the local streets, that we are on the right track to meet our goals, or are we way off track and we'll need to significantly revisit the plan?
I will let Nick answer that with his words, but I think we are on the right track, and we're about to make significant investments in roads. In the past year, as we rolled out the plan, we weren't ready to do capital maintenance, which we are positioned now to be able to go do capital maintenance and you'll see a significant monetary investment in the roads. But I'll let Nick add on to that.
Yeah, I think Craig hit that pretty well, but absolutely, I think we're on the right path. The path of additional capital preventative maintenance is the only path we're going to get to that goal. Now, whether we actually get to that goal by 2025, 26, I don't know right now. We're going to do a complete relook at the modeling this year to see what path we're on. There's several reasons that we see that we may have seen the drop that shows in those stats, and one is what Craig said. We've got a whole bunch of this capital preventative maintenance work that we were hoping to have done in the fall that we couldn't get the contractor in time in the fall to get that done, and that's scheduled for the spring. That type of work will be ongoing this year, early part of this year, second half of this year, again next year. That's going to be going on continuously. So I do think we're on the right track. It is going to take some time, though, but it's the only way we're going to be able to get there.
Nick, could you describe what capital preventive maintenance means?
Certainly.
And what the council members are likely to experience
Yes.
as their constituents see us do that?
I will do that. Just a quick, thank you. A quick recap of previous discussions we've had with council about capital preventative maintenance. It's the concept of investing in your roads at the midpoint of their life cycle to maintain them rather than just waiting until they fail and replacing them. You can see similarities in there with maintaining your car. You change the oil, you do routine maintenance. Things like that. Some of these treatments are going to be different than what we've seen in the past in the city, or in the recent past anyway, where mostly what people have seen are the major reconstruction projects or the resurfacing where we tear out all the asphalt. These treatments, a couple of the ones that we're going to be seeing coming up in the website and whatnot, and there's also, when we start doing these treatments, there's going to be notices put on residents' doors explaining what the treatment is and how it works. So we're trying to get that messaging out to residents to let them know that these types of treatments are coming and what to expect.
Thank you. Also on transportation, looking at the sort of the traffic impacts, I guess part of my vision for where the city goes is creating the infrastructure that helps mitigate the cars that are on the road. 5 years ago or so, there was a lot of discussion with transit of looking at things like queue jumping lanes, signal prioritization, things like that. Where are we and working with the AAATA in terms of evaluating and deploying those kinds of tools that might help us get better throughput of cars and buses on the roads?
I know queue jumping was discussed with Reimagine Washtenaw. I don't know where that is for the whole corridor. That's a question I can ask tomorrow morning. For prioritization, that is actively being looked at. When we had looked at it previously, this would have been 8 years ago, 10 years ago, the bus locating system and the traffic signal system, both were Siemens products, and they didn't talk to each other, so it was hard to do. Signals didn't know where the buses were, and actually the issue was buses reported out on a sub-minute interval. Traffic signals were sampling on the second or sub-second interval, so they just weren't meshing up. But that's an active discussion we are having with connected vehicles right now. Buses can be part of the connected vehicle system. The traffic signal system can know exactly where a bus is and provide prioritization. It's not happening now, but that is one of the active areas of investigation that's going on. So, yes, and I've carefully said prioritization, not preemption.
Okay. And shifting on this nexus between traffic and the housing and population infrastructure, assuming the same number of jobs, is there any information about what the traffic impact is of somebody who's an Ann Arbor resident commuting within Ann Arbor, sort of the intra-city impact versus somebody coming from out of the community into the city? Do we have an indication how that affects?
I don't have anything right off the top of my head. I can tell you that we have a very high biking and ped usage, and I see that as an indication that many of our jobs within the city, the folks are using their feet or their bikes or the bus to go to and from work. But do I have an exact number? No.
Okay. And then, last part, and then I'll turn this over. Looking at the 30-year projections, it was predicting about 15,000 additional people on slide 6, but only 3,000 additional households on slide 7. And then earlier it said a 2.2 person per household average in the city. How are we going to fit 15,000 new people in 3,000 new units?
I don't pretend to know the answer to that, but when you think about what we are building downtown, when we build a unit downtown, how many bedrooms are in many of those units? 5, 6 bedroom units?
Some of them. I guess for my part, and this is getting a little bit beyond just the infrastructure vision, but that 15,000 new people and only 3,000 added units tells me that that's going to exacerbate our housing affordability challenge. And particularly if the point that Councilmember Ackerman made about the SEMCOG numbers where they're predicting a lot of people aging in place and then people who are, as they retire, other people wanting to fill their jobs, but they can't find a place to live. I think it's a social infrastructure rather than a physical infrastructure issue, but I think this is a serious issue that we're going to have to continue to wrestle with about how to be inclusive with these population pressures.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Grant.
Thank you. I had a question that builds on what I'm hearing from residents about roads. So one of the most common questions I get, especially this time of year around the freeze-thaw cycle, is why aren't you building them in a way, hasn't anyone come up with a way to build roads that aren't as susceptible to the freeze-thaw cycle and cracking?
And I will let Nick answer that, but I'll give you the very generalized view. Cost.
Sure. So, I mean, one of the things that I hear from residents too is, we have some smart people in an institution right up the street. Have we ever thought of running any transportation pilot projects in neighborhoods? Thought of
Let me ask
testing
what you
new
mean
materials?
by transportation.
I think more around road materials. So, have we ever thought of putting ourselves out there as a test community for some of these products that maybe someone's developing? And what do the cost differences look like? I guess would be helpful to know.
Okay. I don't know that I can give you numbers on that right off the top of my head.
Yeah, sure.
But certainly, as Craig touched on, there's ways to build roads that are much less susceptible to frost, to freeze-thaw conditions. That kind of goes, the cost of that kind of goes back to what I was just talking about before with in order to get to the goals that we need to get, we need to be focusing on capital preventative maintenance more so than other things. In order to build a road that is less susceptible to frost, for example, we need to completely reconstruct that road. It's not a matter of just replacing the asphalt, for example. It's about the drainage underneath it. It's about the soil underneath it. When you're talking about replacing that, you're talking about a full reconstruction, which is the most expensive treatment that you can do on a road. When we do those types of treatments, we're certainly looking into, getting proper drainage underneath the roads, edge drains to intercept water and keep them out from underneath the pavement, because water is what the problem is that causes that. So yes, there are ways to do that, absolutely. They are very expensive, and that's why we can't do them all the time on every project that we do, for example. You mentioned about, collaboration with the university, materials, things like that. We've had a few discussions over the time that I've been here with the university on various things. They have some, for example, some experimental concrete that they've developed that's very interesting. We've talked about some places to try it out and things like that. It's never really come to fruition. Again, those materials, being that they're not readily available in the marketplace, are extremely expensive. So there's a cost benefit of, if we could get the materials for a greatly reduced cost as part of a trial project, that would be great, and I would love to do that. But it's a lot of the stuff that they are developing is not exactly readily out there in the marketplace that we can get our hands on for a decent price.
Sure. But with 300 miles of roads, maybe if they wanted to try a little piece of one.
We would be
that
happy to participate in that.
Okay, thank you. And I don't know if it's possible, but with some of the education about the kinds of preventative maintenance that we're doing, it might be helpful to have some FAQs for those kinds of questions too? Like
Yeah.
why are we so susceptible to freeze
This
thaw?
flyer that we're developing, I want to get in all of your hands very soon, and that will hopefully answer a lot of those questions.
Like why are there so many potholes?
Maybe that's a good point to add to this flyer a little bit more. The flyer's more about the what and what to expect rather than the why.
Sure.
So maybe getting some of that on there might help with you guys when you're
Or
getting
even
questions
like a
as
link
well.
to the why? Maybe
Pardon me?
even a link to the why somewhere
Yeah,
could be
yeah.
helpful.
Councilmember Smith.
Thank you. I just have a few questions. Nick, you can probably stay up here because, like everything else, it's a road question. My question is more about climate change and the impact we've seen. This winter has been a much harder winter on our roads than any of the last couple. Does our modeling look at, what another winter like this winter with the extreme freeze-thaw cycles that we've had will do to the lower rated roads that we've got? I mean, I think Councilmember Lum made a great observation in noticing that our number of local streets in the 1 to 3 range has gone up considerably. Do we have any idea of what another winter like this one do to that? Does that take some of those 4, 5, and 6 rated roads and put those into that category?
That's a very good question. I would say that the modeling software that we use, I doubt very much takes into consideration climate change issues. Typically, what it does in terms of its modeling is it has kind of a standard degradation curves to predict how a road will decline in condition over time. Now, I imagine as climate change is taken more into consideration and things like that, those standard degradation curves might change, but I don't think we have the capability of doing that now. A very tough thing to predict. A milder winter, which we could see milder winters. Who knows? Very unpredictable, but it could have a less harsh effect and one winter and then a harsher effect another winter. So I think it's not being an expert on on that exactly. I think it's probably a hard thing to work into a modeling scenario.
Okay, thank you. The second question I have is, this is our second pass-through of the sidewalk program, right? So in your mind, at least it would make sense to me, just from an intuitive standpoint, that we're going to do a lot less replacement each pass that we do here because we've taken care of the worst stretches. Is that a reasonable assumption to make, that we're going to be making a little bit smaller investment in these projects over the next 5 years?
Yes, that is a reasonable assumption to make, and that's the assumption that I am making as well. So last year was the repeat of year one.
Right.
And we definitely did see, we spent less this time around than we did the first time. However, that very first year, we weren't quite in the groove yet, maybe. So I'm really interested in seeing this year, how this year compares and next year compares. Yes, I'm absolutely expecting there's going to be less spent this 5-year cycle than the first one. Now, that said, most of our sidewalk repairs that we're making are because the sidewalk slabs are being moved around by tree roots. That's going to continue to happen, so there's always going to be some repairs, but I imagine at some point we'll plateau out at a kind of a standard investment that we need to make to maintain our system.
And then the last thing that I have is Craig, you had asked for questions to be included in the survey, and one of the things that I think would be useful for us to know as policymakers is, comparing the ideas of, basically right now, property taxes pay for most of the services that we have, but to look at more opportunities for fee-for-service and whether, behaviors could reduce costs. I think, getting some feedback from the community on some of those ideas would be helpful for us as far as, how do we continue to pay for the infrastructure and how are those costs distributed across the community?
Thank you.
Councilmember Crapo.
Thank you. I have just a couple questions. First is, we did the population forecast, and Mr. Lazarus might be able to answer this. Did that take into account the expansion or the increase in university enrollment that's likely to happen over the same time frame? And then on the second part of that, would that include in terms of housing?
So the data is SEMCOG data.
We can find out what the basis of that data was.
I can circulate the report as well.
Yeah.
If that'd be helpful. When you look at the breakdowns by age group, the population band that would be reflective of students, both graduate and undergraduate, seems to stay stable, but you see a 100% increase in the elderly population.
Okay.
We had the opportunity to talk to the Kiwanis this afternoon, and one of the things that you do see as a trend nationwide is university cities are becoming more and more popular retirement destinations. So not only do we want to support people who want to stay in their homes as they get older, but we do need to recognize that wealthier seniors looking for a place that is maybe easier on a day-to-day basis, but still has the amenities of a larger city could also drive housing cost and product type for us as well. So it supports what Mr. Ackerman said, both in terms of trying to help the current population, but we need to expect that that's going to occur. Things that the university is going to do that will impact traffic flows, as they've reported, are some changes in how they provide services at the hospital, as they look to move some of their outpatient clinics outside the city, and you have more inpatient services. They're also looking to expand the hospital with some additional clinics, going from to single-family or single-occupant rooms in the hospital. So those things could have a positive impact on traffic because they want to have the outpatient clinics further out where they can provide, I guess, more free parking, surface parking. So that's something that we will probably have to look at as well. I'm trying to think what else the university has said that they're going to do, but
Redevelopment of North Campus.
redevelopment of North Campus, thank you, is also something that you look at for more housing. We've talked to them about not turning their backs to the Plymouth corridor so that the development does tie in
And
to.
Huron Parkway.
I'm sorry?
And Huron Parkway, too.
And you're on Parkway. But that does then increase the number of pedestrian traffic that we'd have to get across those major arteries as well. So those things will have both direct and indirect impacts on future planning.
All right. Now, part two, then, a number of the influencers we have are different master plans. And when you look at the dates when they are done, a number of them they're approaching 10, 15 years. It's been since they've been updated or done. As we're looking forward, especially the 10, 15, 20-year, is it time to start looking at updating these so they reflect kind of where we're at now and where we want to go forward from here, since a number of things have changed from the early 2000s, the mid-2000s when these were done?
I would say yes. The transportation master plan is on its way to being looked at for being redone. Some of the other master plans will be influenced, or what I'm struggling with is how do you tie zoning and those issues with some of the other master plans, along with transportation. So the short answer to your question is yes, that's recognized.
And then I think the third in the same line is, as we go forward, I think it's going to be important for us as a body really to know and to think about and to understand what are policy impacts in terms of where are there shortages? Are there policies we need to provide better guidance or clarity on things, or are there current policies that are going to need to be updated because they're no longer valid based on where we're at as a community in a city?
Councilor Berlin.
Thanks. Just a question and a couple comments. First question, the presentation was pretty high level, and that's fine, but in the past, we've received, detailed information on specific capital projects, requests, financial data, projected P&Ls and fund balances, and for the key funds, general funds, solid waste, streets, et cetera. I think they were called two-pagers and, or something like that. Tom Crawford would know. And the data was helpful in assessing budget, you're smiling, priorities. If you've prepared them, can you please share them? Obviously not tonight, and if not, are you planning to provide more detail on these capital priorities when we receive the recommended budget next week?
I'm looking at Marty on the two-pagers. We haven't
Okay, I'll
prepared
be
them.
asking for them.
Because that was one of the discussions about the focus of tonight.
Yeah.
Whether we focused on the immediate budget or whether we were trying to get you to focus on the larger
Right.
plan for going forward, because we're going into the second year of a two-year budget, so we're not proposing any major changes to the budget you've already seen last year. And we were taking this opportunity to focus you on longer-term, further out issues that would be helpful to us to know where you wanted to go.
Okay. I was thinking of this as a more traditional budget presentation. Again, this is high level, it's fine, but I don't think there was one dollar figure anywhere in the presentation. And I will be, just a heads up, no surprise, because you do, we will be contemplating specific capital projects. So I'll be asking for some of that financial data. You did ask on the citizen survey slide what questions we should ask. And in terms of this national survey that we've done, I think the strengths are that it does enable comparisons to other communities, comparisons of feelings about Ann Arbor over time. But I think the weakness of the survey, like any citizen satisfaction survey, is that it does not have any questions regarding what folks are willing to pay for or questions about service or program trade-offs. I remember years ago when we did we conducted a citizen survey on assessing budget priorities. This was back in the 90s. And remember the key former finance person for the city, former Mr. Tom Crawford, had attended a Municipal Finance Officers Association meeting, and one of the important takeaways was that you have to obviously educate people about the budget, but then present things in a series of trade-offs. So, it's like asking someone, do you want leather seats in your car? Yes, and would you be willing to pay X for it? I mean, you need that kind of information and trade-off data so that you can set priorities. On our survey, the one area Ann Arbor rated low on in the survey vis-a-vis other communities was cost of living. And as a city, in council, we focus a lot on creating affordable housing, but that low rating on cost of living should, in my view, raise a flag about affordability concerns for everyone in town, including tax and fee levels to support city government. So that's a concern I would raise there. And then just one, I appreciate Councilmember Grand's raising the questions about the kind of asphalt materials we use, and because I'm sure we all do get questions about the longevity of our roads. Every day I drive on Arlington, the city did an awesome job, saying thank you, City of Ann Arbor, like everyone. But it was, before we did that, it wasn't too many years ago that sections of Arlington had been resurfaced. And in talking to some of our engineers, I learned that we had used some different materials, and we're using some better materials today. So I applaud us for doing
To your
that.
response on materials, that was a shift statewide. We tend to use MDOT specified materials because that's what the industry knows how to produce, and you can get it in a reasonable cost. I think there are many in the industry that said MDOT took us sideways for a few years, and they've realized the error of their ways, and they're back to more traditional mixes.
Okay, and I hope too, and I'm sure you do, look at the life cycle costs too. So
We
get
do on the,
as much bang for our buck as possible.
when we do major streets, we do look at life cycle costing. When I
Okay.
say major streets, I should say major reconstructions. We look at life cycle costing.
Okay, and then just lastly, just to follow on to what Councilmember Kalasopathy was saying about, have we thought about negotiating with developers to get some payback perhaps on the wear and tear on the roads in the general vicinity of their developments? I'm sure Councilmember Westfall as well has been hearing from folks. Okay, last year we resurfaced Green Road. Okay, what do we see on Green Road today? All these double barrel construction vehicles, back and forth on Green Road. And I'm sure I certainly have heard from residents saying, sharing concerns about the wear and tear on this brand spanking new, nicely resurfaced, remilled road from last year. And these trucks are going to the new developments off of Nixon, so hence the question.
Your concern is heard. And let me take this opportunity. I apologize for not having done this earlier. Also with me tonight is Matt Rechtine, who is with the Attorney's Office. I don't know if you've all met him before.
Sure.
But he is supporting public services and ultimately is the backup for Abby Elias. So he has captured your concern and will
Thanks.
bring back.
If I could add something
It's a
in.
community concern.
One thing that drives me absolutely bonkers are utility cuts and new pavements. So and that's where you start the premature deterioration of a pavement. So part of the asset management approach is trying to make sure that either we do that ahead of time or we more strictly enforce a moratorium on cuts. And I think that's part of what you'll see in planning as we go forward as well. One thing, I don't want to belabor the point, but when you talk about preventive maintenance on roadways, it certainly is cheaper to spend $30,000 to $50,000 on maintenance now than $500,000 per lane mile later by letting the road go. The expectation that we're all going to have to manage is the fact that the initial pavement is going to be rougher than people are used to, and you'll probably hear some of those concerns. As Nick said, though, the benefit is sealing the pavement to prevent the water intrusion, which will help with the formation of potholes down the road. But just having the experience of doing cape sealing and seal coating and chip sealing, there will be an adjustment period in the public's eye as to the quality of the roadway that they're getting. And I bring that up because we need, as you've asked for, we need to provide the background information to support that. But it is a very financially prudent thing to do. And as both you and Ms. Kalasopathy said, we will look at ways to make sure that, to the extent we can, we get fiscal upfront to protect the roadways from undue wear and tear.
For my part, I'd like to just jump in briefly and touch upon a couple of things. I think that you staff hears loud and clear that what we hear as a council hear most about is the condition of the roads, and I don't think that's any surprise. In my view, that's because it's the major infrastructure system that it's a major infrastructure system that is troubled and has been underfunded by the state for decades. As a consequence, I think we are where we are here today. But I think it's important for us as a group, and I know that staff is doing this, every day, to think about the infrastructure systems that, from a resident perspective, seem to be working fine and are indeed working fine, but require long-term planning and upfront investment today and planning for investment tomorrow. And so I guess I don't want the evening to pass without a hosanna for the work and planning that's being done with respect to water. I know we're going to have a long conversation about the treatment plant and what we need to do in order to make sure that the 80-year-old portion of the plant is refurbished, is overhauled, because the people who are going to be in Ann Arbor for decades to come rely upon it. The distribution system, of course, too, is aging just as quickly as everything else, and the fact that it's underground and that people don't see it every day means that I think we as a body have to make sure that we pay attention to it in a way that the residents may not. It's their common expectation that people turn the water on and it comes on clean and quick. And that's the way we want it, and that's the way that we all demand it. But in order to do that, we need to plan and plan slowly for it. Further, I think we haven't really talked much about stormwater here today. That's another thing that I'm glad that staff is continuing to work on in order to make sure that our long-term stormwater systems are improved. I know that with respect to new projects that come online, every new site plan that gets approved has stormwater improvements associated with it in a way that improve the system. And I think that and this gets to the climate action point I think that Councilmember Smith was raising. We know that we are in a higher precipitation environment than was ever expected. The exact figures escape me, but dozens of Michigan stadiums filled with water are a novel experience for us here in the city. And I know that our systems aren't designed for it, but that we, going forward, need to design for it and are. And so I think it's important that we as a body support what staff is doing with that and communicate what staff is doing, communicate what we as a municipal organization is doing to the residents to know that these major systems, people don't drive over them. People do drive over them every day, but they don't know it. And they are just as critical to the long-term health of the city as anything else, and we need to continue to focus on it. Councilmember Wojciechowski.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. Thank you for bringing up the positive, that positive note. I think, and I want to thank staff as well. In the state of Michigan, most municipalities in the state do a very poor job of infrastructure. The Michigan Society of the Michigan section of the American Society of Civil Engineers rated Michigan's infrastructure as an average of D+. And so I think by comparison to our peers in Michigan, we are doing very well. That doesn't mean we're done, and I'm glad that you're bringing forward the work on how we get our, continue to improve. But I really credit you, Mr. Hoopy, your staff, and Mr. Lazarus, the leadership, to help making sure we're putting the money in to make sure we're maintaining the assets and improving upon them. So thank you for that leadership. It does cost money, and so there is an affordability trade-off to not be among the other D+ cities in Michigan. And so that's something, as we look at the rate study and others, we've got to continue to keep in front of us. I think making sure we've got safe drinking water, et cetera, is worth the investment. In terms of, I want to point out, though, that in terms of affordability on the taxing side of it, overall, the state of Ann Arbor's total direct tax rate has actually fallen by almost $500,000 from 2008 to 2017. So our taxes from the city are actually going down. Two other pieces to be on my soapbox, and then I'll yield the floor. One, there was a question on what is our vision for our transportation network, and there was an argument made that we should be focusing on the streets and not the sidewalks. From my perspective, having safe pedestrian infrastructure saves lives. It makes sure that our community is available and accessible to all users, including those who depend on wheelchair or other walkers or have other mobility impairments, and I don't want to leave them behind. So I think having a comprehensive infrastructure plan is very important to me. I don't want us to be fixing potholes but leaving unsafe crosswalks for anybody. And then finally, on the question of the citizen survey, one of the things that came up at the training, the one community training last week, I just want to share with council, staff brought it forward, but the recognition that we are able to ask for additional demographic data from the citizen survey, and I think doing that will help us fine tune not just where are we doing well and where are we not, but what parts of our community are we serving well and what aren't we. So I think adding that demographic data in would be a very useful piece of our analysis.
Councilmember Grant.
Thank you. Just a little more feedback on the citizen survey. I'd like to have us get some feedback on some of our initiatives of the last few years. The first one that comes to mind, I was looking at the questions from the last citizen survey, and we have questions about safety overall and in your neighborhoods, but we don't have anything relative to pedestrian safety and some of the improvements that we've made around schools, for example. So I don't know if we can craft a question or two relative to that, and I'm sure others have ideas about other initiatives that they might like to get feedback on, but that's one idea.
Further discussion? Councilmember Westfall.
Thank you. I just want to second the comment about utility cuts. One stretch that's been complained about to me is driving between Concordia University and Huron High School down Getty's Road. There's must be a series of 6 or 7 cuts that can almost make your car bottom out, and it's apparently no fault of ours because these appear to be utility cuts. So,
I'll take ownership of some of those. Some of those are water main breaks.
Well, thank you for taking ownership.
I don't recall 6, but I'll take at least 2 or 3 of them.
But we and neighbors have appreciated what you've done on Glacier Way to remedy some of those. So I just wanted to reinforce that. And following Councilmember Warper-Hosky's comment about sidewalk infrastructure, this may be beyond the scope of what we want to talk about tonight, but I'm thinking mostly of gaps. I know we're doing repair replacement. For example, there along Bardstown Trail in my neighborhood, there are areas where the sidewalk just completely ends for a few parcels and starts up again, and kids walking or biking to school, come out into the traffic and then have to go back. Is there some kind of, and I know this is a tricky thing, not every neighborhood wants sidewalks, but there's some clear issues, particularly with safe routes to school, that seem to
We
need
have
help.
a map layer that lists all our sidewalk gaps. We have done a prioritization of which gaps by our program are likely candidates to be filled first. And one of the generators in that program is the nearness to school. I think it's probably time that we share that with council again, where we are in that prioritization, what projects we've done and which projects are upcoming. And I'm looking at Nick to see if that's doable or whether he's telling me I'm crazy for offering it again.
If I can add one thing to that, I mean, we have, we've used that prioritization model to plan out projects, in the next few years. There's some listed in the CIP. We'll certainly revisit that when we redo the CIP this fall. Primarily what we focused on thus far are taking on individual sidewalk gap projects that we can fund through federal aid dollars. And so those are primarily sidewalk gap projects that have been along major streets because that's what federal aid dollars will easily fund. The benefit of that is the special assessments that have to go along with those first-time improvements can be greatly discounted by using those federal dollars. As we go into the neighborhoods, you know, to fill gaps, you know, we'll have to look at, you know, funding availability and funding opportunities, I guess. One example of that is near Northside Steam. We have the Safe Routes to School Committee at that school applied for, and we're in the process of receiving the grant for that the city will then implement to fill sidewalk gaps in that neighborhood. So there's some opportunities to fill some of those where they immediately work towards school safety improvements like that. Some of the other areas where that's not necessarily going to be viable is going to be somewhat challenging to figure out how to fill those in a way that, you know, that is going to be affordable.
Okay, thank you. And I just my last question / comment. There seems to be some degree of confusion or conflicting information about the financial impact of development on the city. And obviously, if there's clear-cut examples of where there's harm being done and repairs needing to be made because of, I don't know, equipment physically damaging the road in the short term, certainly we should pursue that. But from every information I have, all the data I've seen, there's far and away a net benefit to current taxpayers for every new construction that comes in. So being able to put some numbers to that might help clarify in the future, might involve some collaboration with Mr. Crawford, I imagine. We've been given information about, you know, the net impact to the general fund, about how much tax revenue comes in from new development, but we seem to keep coming back to, you know, can the infrastructure handle X, Y, or Z housing or commercial or downtown? I'm aware of some of the pinch points with, I guess, sanitary, and we have the offset mitigation and so on, but I guess just getting a more holistic feel for who stands to gain from allowing some of this inevitable population pressure to be accommodated in the city versus not would be helpful.
We can provide that.
Thank you.
Further discussion?
I think maybe to answer that question a little bit more, you had stated there's a timing issue with the damage that residents see versus the time where the extra money comes into the city's, you know, coffers from the development. That's a challenge to match those two things together. Not saying we can't have a projection, but you know, that's what it is. It's a projection. You know, I think the real challenge as we look forward, one of them is management of the right-of-way real estate, and what are we willing to do? Since we're not building any new roads, I think we've acknowledged that we can't really build our way out of this congestion. We need to be smarter about how we use that real estate. Some other questions, when we talk about prioritization, are we willing to put more effort initially into getting the arterials up and then coming back and working on the neighborhoods? Do we want to mix that? Maybe more priority on neighborhood streets, and that's something I think that when you look at the work plan, not really necessarily for 19, but the years beyond that, that kind of guidance and programming, and it does get to Ms. Lum's comments about where's the capital improvement program going. I think that kind of feedback would be really helpful. Some things, are we willing to buy property for park and ride on the park and ride lots outside the city or on the fringes so people don't all drive downtown? The investment in parking garages is an interesting question. There's a need now, but we don't know what the future is going to bring there. Are we willing to look at and go back to DOT to adjust some of the issues with our highway ramps, particularly since the one I'm most familiar with is Barton Drive, where we start directing a lot of traffic in front of a elementary and middle school. what are we willing to do structurally as well as outreach to get some partnerships to look for other sources of funds. The 80/20 federal-local funding model may not exist into the future, so we need to be prepared for that as well. And then, I guess if we're wrapping, I'll share an anecdote I shared a little bit earlier today. Last week after the basketball championship, I got a lot of calls from friends who I grew up with in and around the Philadelphia area. And the interesting thing, it wasn't gloating about Villanova winning, it was about the commercial that ran towards the end of the game, the Pure Michigan ad for Ann Arbor. And the comments were all about what a great place Ann Arbor looked like to live. Apparently that ad also ran the other night during the Food Channel. Quality of life is perishable, and people tend to flock to areas where there is an exceptional quality of life. Our challenge from an infrastructure standpoint is to really look down the road and ensure we have those systems that preserves that quality of life and make sure that, as we get older, as our kids are here, and as their kids are down the road, that we can make sure that that quality of life persists. And that depends on the decisions that council's going to make today, tomorrow, and the next couple of years.
If I can jump in with one final comment, as we go into the summer season, we will have a very active season with street capital maintenance. We will see lots of maintenance folks aren't used to seeing. That will generate comments. The Cape sealing will be something that, as we go through it, it will generate comments. The chips, although we will try to manage them. So asking your indulgence as we go forward, it's all to get to a good end. And then I remind you that your electrical providers are having 2 major projects this year that will affect multiple neighborhoods, South State Street, Granger, and somehow between Granger and Washtenaw. And that will generate lots of concerns and comments. And I beg your indulgence on that, because that one we won't control the timing of. Well, we'll be controlling the quality of the final product for street restoration. Getting to the end may be a little messy.
Understood, thank you. Thank you very much. We now come to public comment general time. Public comment general time is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to council and the community about matters of municipal interest. To speak at public comment general time, one need not have signed up in advance. Speakers have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time clock. As a matter of courtesy, we may have only one person speaking at a time. And finally, if you require assistance in speaking before council, we'd be delighted to provide it to you. Is there anyone who would like to speak at public comment?
Hi, my name is Ed Vilmetti. I'm a pedestrian. Despite what some members of council would think, my use of the sidewalks is not unusual or weird, or it's a transportation choice for me. So I ride the bus too, for that matter. But that's not what I'm here to speak to. I'm here to speak primarily to one of the slides you saw regarding projected growth in Ann Arbor population from SEMCOG data. I'll just, 2 things come to concern. One is the slide itself is a classic example of what Edward Tufte called chart junk. It doesn't show historical, it doesn't show previous projections. And I would just caution everyone who takes SEMCOG numbers to take them with a large grain of salt. They have not had a track record always of predicting the future. Not that anyone can really predict the future, but SEMCOG seems to be uniquely prepared to mispredict the future. So, I'll just leave you with that. The numbers, if you divide them out, seem weird. I think several members of council noticed that there were some inconsistencies with that. I would just, take caution. City population has not been growing. The SEMCOG numbers in that projection also projected a substantial growth for the city of Detroit to 2045. So, take any plans for the future with some concern. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Nelson, and I live in the 4th Ward. I'm here because I found last week's council discussion really confusing. Starting last Monday, since the meeting, I've heard multiple members of this council claim that the beginning of the current Y-lot situation was 2012 or 2013, and that timeline does not make sense to me. My husband and I moved here in 2004, and we remember hearing about the Y-lot and the challenges dealing with it as soon as we moved back here. So we've lived here almost 14 years, and for as long as we have lived here, that property's function and development has been unresolved. And I know plenty of people who have lived here much longer than me, many other residents who were grown-ups in 2003, and remember more clearly than I do exactly how long the city has tried unsuccessfully to dictate the future of that Y-lot. So it is misleading to posture that 2012 is anywhere near the beginning of this property as an issue. Last week, I was also very surprised to see people in this room react so strongly to the mere mention of background and history. And I understand why this group might not like to talk about the extra decade that this property has been sitting around. But I'm amazed that anyone here thinks that's a reasonable way for this town to function. Just ignoring facts that are uncomfortable or perhaps embarrassing. The full history of this lot is not a ringing endorsement of how very skilled the council is at managing property like this. So this feels like an obvious statement to make, but based on what I've seen from folks in this room, it seems necessary to say it. Thoughtful and sensible people do actually consider context when making decisions, and that includes past history, whether or not you personally remember it or were involved in it. I just want to add that 2 days ago, I read the amended complaint for the current litigation because I was so puzzled by what I heard last week. And honestly, I hope that everyone in this town reads that amended complaint because there are plenty of people with the legal background to understand it. Some people on this council may not have been here making decisions in 2003 or 2012 or 2015, but all of you now have a responsibility to deal with the facts from those years. And I am baffled by how eagerly and aggressively people in this room have oversimplified or simply ignored facts to the point of completely misrepresenting the city's choices. Everyone at this table should have been paying close attention, and everyone at this table should know better than to pretend that this is a simple issue of racing against a deadline to exercise a right to buy back.
Thank you.
We are better than this. That's all I have to say. We're just better than this.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak at public comment?
Hi, City Council members. My name is Chandani Wierspa. I'm currently a senior at the University of Michigan studying public policy, and I actually live in Saline, and I've lived in Saline my whole life. I previously came to speak to you in October. I'm interning at Civ City, a local nonpartisan nonprofit that focuses on increasing awareness of how local government works and getting residents engaged in civic life. Through Civ City and with the executive director, Mary Morgan, I recently published a report that looks at the level of diversity in local government, specifically looking at Ann Arbor and also the Washtenaw County to some extent. I will be emailing you all with that link tonight. Many of you contributed to this report by filling out the survey I had sent to gather demographic data and allowing me to interview you for this project. So thank you so much to the 7 of you who responded to the survey and the 4 of you who took the time to be interviewed. It really helped. One takeaway I have from this project is that many people across bodies of government, specifically in Ann Arbor, do care a lot about diversity and what that means for the community. But I haven't seen very much collaboration between these bodies or much proactive collaboration with the community. One example, actually, that I really appreciate is when Councilman Smith added the idea just today of including the community on how to pay for all those road repairs. I don't totally understand that, but I appreciate that you're thinking about how the community is going to react to possible tax increases. Another example would be hosting joint coffee hours like across boards to engage with the community and bridge that gap. A second takeaway I have is that, actually a final takeaway I have is that there's still a lot to do in terms of improvement of diversity. That doesn't just mean having elected officials who look like the people they represent, but that's definitely a start. And looking at the population of Ann Arbor as a whole, and if you see in the report, I gives particular statistics, many people in the community aren't represented by current elected officials. Right now, we only have one person of color on city council. There are very few young people in office, no young people of color, no young women at all. In fact, as we look to the mayoral and city council elections coming up, there are no women as candidates, and it's really frustrating for me to see that, especially as I've been told by many of you that having a diverse body matters. I would really love to see the active recruitment of younger people, more folks of color, more women to run for office. All of you are in that unique position to actively recruit members of our community, and your endorsement would make a huge difference. I really hope that this report will encourage public discussion within boards and with the community, and I really encourage you to read the report and email me back if anything is particularly striking. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak at public comment? Just come on up.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Mari Saeed, and I'm here to shed light on an issue that affects all Ann Arbor residents. In the past 6 months, there have been 566 crimes in the city of Ann Arbor, of which 142 have been assaults. 119 have been vehicle thefts or break-ins, 70 have been burglaries, and 17 have been sex crimes. However, these are just the reported incidents. It can only be imagined how many crimes have actually occurred. This high crime rate strikes fear into the residents of this beautiful city, especially when the sun no longer shines. With Ann Arbor being such a lively, populous city, there are always people walking around after sundown, whether it is a bright student leaving the U of M library or a family walking home from dinner at a downtown restaurant. This issue does not discriminate against any Ann Arbor residents. However, many of the city's areas with high population densities are the most poorly lit. Ann Arbor's population density map illustrates that these areas lie between Packard Street and Arlington Boulevard and South University Ave and Wells Street, neighborhoods and street corners with heavy foot traffic. We took the liberty of walking these streets at night and discovered just how underlit these roads are. Unsurprisingly, based off of the crime map provided by the city of Ann Arbor, these areas have also experienced the highest crime rates in the past 6 months. The residents of these areas should not have to worry about if they will get home safely if they are walking after sundown. Safety should be a top priority, and right now we feel as though it is not. Since launching our petition 3 weeks ago, we have gathered 206 signatures to support our cause and movement. One petition signer even commented that he had a friend who was killed by a car because of a poorly lit crosswalk. This incident was right near Huron High School. City of Ann Arbor, we are asking you to do your part. In the past few years, you have invested thousands of dollars to install LED streetlights around the city. While we recognize their advantages for economic and environmental sustainability, these lights lack functionality and vibrance. Lights are not only an issue of sustainability, but also safety. We are asking you to consider the safety of your residents and invest in installing more lights in the most populous but most dimly lit areas of the city and to improve the functionality of the existing lights. City of Ann Arbor, you must act now. The presence of bright, illuminating streetlights could be the difference between life and death for a pedestrian. Join the movement to light up Ann Arbor. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak at public comment? Seeing no one, public comment is closed. May I have a motion to adjourn, please? Moved by Councilmember Smith, second by Councilmember Crapol. Discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? We are adjourned. Good evening and welcome to the March 9 special session of the Ann Arbor City Council. Would the clerk please read the order and notice of call of special session?
Notice is hereby given that a special session of the City of Ann Arbor City Council will be held Monday, April 9th, 2018 at 9:00 p.m. in the City Council Chambers, second floor of the Guy C. Larkham Jr. City Hall Building, 301 East Huron Street, for the following purpose. A special session to go into closed session under the Open Meetings Act to discuss pending litigation under MCL 15.268E.
If you're able, please rise and join us for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would our clerk please call the roll of council?
Councilmember Calisapathy?
Here.
Councilmember Bannister? Councilmember Westfall?
Here.
Councilmember Lum? Here. Councilmember Grand?
Here.
Councilmember Hackerman?
Here.
Mayor Taylor?
Here.
Councilmember Eaton?
Here.
Councilmember Crapel?
Here.
Councilmember Warpahowski?
Here.
Councilmember Smith?
Present.
We have a quorum.
May I have a motion, please, to approve the agenda? Moved by Councilmember Westfall, seconded by Councilmember Lum. Discussion of the agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The agenda is approved. We now come to public comment general time. Public comment general time is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to council and the community about matters of municipal interest. To speak at public comment general time, one need not have signed up in advance. Speakers have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time clock. As a matter of courtesy, we may have only one person speaking at a time. And finally, if you require assistance in speaking before council, we'd be delighted to provide it to you. Is there anyone who'd like to speak at public comment?
Hi, my name is Everett Vilmetti. Two points for tonight, and I'll keep it brief because I know you're looking forward to going into closed session. One is simply a process matter. When I read the announcement of the special session, it seemed to indicate that the likelihood that you would actually open up the agenda after the special section and vote on anything would be very small. But I plan on sticking around for the duration, just in case you decide to do that. I would rather not, but I will. The other is regarding the subject of the lawsuit. I was given a copy of the amended complaint by the plaintiff's attorney. I've asked the city attorney for documents in this case and hope to get them fairly soon. And I'm planning to publish each of those documents on a municipal website known as A2 Docs, or the Ann Arbor Area Government Document Repository. I don't have a strong opinion in this situation, other than to note that this parcel has a long and tortured history of lawsuits and plans and fountains and other amenities that council has wanted to have on this parcel, and yet more than a decade after it first was put into play, we have a vacant, somewhat scrubby-looking parking lot that doesn't have any cars in it. So I'm hoping that you all will make a good decision, and I'm hoping that citizens will be as well informed as they might be about all of the decisions, of the points that might go into making those decisions. Good luck.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at public comment? Seeing no one, then public comment is closed. Do we have a closed session today on the, Mr. Postema?
We do, and I just note for the record that that is all that is on the public notice, and the public notice does allow additional things to be added, but it would need to be unanimous under the charter, and we do not have all of the members of the council present. So even if the council wanted to, that would not be possible tonight. Usually those things that are maybe after a closed session would also be on an agenda. So, but yeah, we only have one matter, the Wylot litigation, so that's it tonight.
May I have a motion, please, to go into closed session? Moved by Councilmember Crapo, seconded by Councilmember Smith. Discussion? Roll call vote, please, starting with Councilmember Ackerman.
Councilmember Ackerman?
Yes.
Mayor Taylor?
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton?
Yes.
Councilmember Crapo?
Yes.
Councilmember Warpowski?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Kalasapati?
Yes.
Councilmember Westfall?
Yes.
Councilmember Lum?
Yes.
Councilmember Grand?
Yes.
Motion carries.
We are in closed session. May I have a motion, please, to go back into open session? Moved by Councilmember Warpahowski, seconded by Councilmember Ackerman. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It is approved. May I motion, please, to adjourn? Moved by Councilmember Lum, seconded by Councilmember Grand. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? We are adjourned.